Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Rabbi Stephen, Rav Shmuel, with you with this week's 10-minute Torah. So it's getting a little bit darker, yes, and we are pretty much planning on having the Friday night services a little bit earlier now. We've been starting about 8. Now that it's getting darker early, we'd like to have them at 7:30. Stay tuned. You'll be getting notified as to when. The interesting thing, when this came up, of course, it was for the convenience of some people that didn't get done with work on Friday and would allow them some time, but some of that has changed now, so it allows us to start earlier and, of course, end a little earlier as well, about a half an hour. The question came up, and I'd like to review this, as what is the appropriate time to have a Mariv or an evening service? And by that token, what about the other services? What about Shacharit, which is the morning service? What about the afternoon service, Mincha, and Mariv? Well, of course, Mariv can be done after sundown or 3 stars. Some people say, which is it? And the answer, according to the Talmud, is you decide, but be consistent. Either you're going to go by sundown or you're going to go by 3 stars. And some sages say that you can have a Mariv service all the way up to midnight. Some other sages say you can have a Mariv service all the way to dawn the next day. Or in Judaism, it's the same day because, of course, the beginning of the day is, evening. So Shachrit, it actually is to dawn until the first 4 hours or so of the day. That's based on the first watch of the temple. Mincha is about a half an hour after the noontime, all the way till dawn. And there's another version of Mincha that says a few hours after that. But for our purposes, we'll leave it at that. So now let's talk a little bit about this week's portion, Parashat Vayishlach. And what happens is now Vayishlach, and Jacob is sending messengers to his brother Esau. He has left Laban. He is en route to his homeland, and he's going to settle in a couple of different places. First in Sukkot. He's going to have that as temporary residence. He's going to be in Shechem, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. And then off to, his hometown, his home in Canaan. So he knows he has to pass by Esau, and Esau and him have had some really tough times. So Jacob does what the Art Scroll Chumash says 3 things. He first of all prays. He then makes an offering to Esau, to make amends for his past quote unquote stealing of his birthright, which, as most of you know, I don't agree with. And the final thing is that he takes action to make sure. And the sages say this is what Jews ought to do. Don't only rely on God's mercy because God might have other plans. Take precautions. Do what you need to do. So what he does, besides the praying and sending lavish gifts to Esau to make up for his seeming offense, is he divides his entourage, his wives and his handmaids and his servants and his livestock and supplies and his riches, into 2 different camps in case Esau, who is coming with 400 men, happen to not feel the same way of reconciliation as Jacob does. Maybe if one camp is attacked, the other one will get away. Nice military maneuver. As it turns out, Esau is glad to hear him because Esau has thrived. Remember, Jacob gave Esau a blessing, and Esau has done very well. He's got a whole army of people behind him, so obviously he's done well. And, Jacob first offers him his riches, and Esau's like, no, that's okay. And then finally, well, okay, since you insist, which is kind of a Middle Eastern way, or a Near Eastern, or at that time, just kind of a way of being humble in the face of a lavish gift. Now, let's not forget what's going on here, because last week I gave kind of a synopsis of the story, and I did not mention the idea of Jacob's ladder, stairway to heaven, angels going up and down. There's a lot going on in Genesis, and sometimes I don't get to it year after year. I also like to vary the topics as we go year to year with the Torah. I would submit to you that you take one verse in the Torah, any verse, I don't care where it is, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, you could spend hours talking and analyzing and critiquing that verse. That's how rich the Torah is. The Eitz Chaim makes the point, well, the narrator left it out. Well, yeah, the narrator sometimes of the Torah, or the narration, let's put it that way, sometimes can be sparing. And this is a question we get to. Sometimes it's very elaborate. Sometimes it just goes right down to the infinitesimal detail. And sometimes it just glosses over. And why? Because certain things in the Torah are important or germane to our understanding the history of Judaism, which in a sense is what it is, and sometimes it isn't. So Jacob actually is a prophet. He's got the gift of prophecy, mostly when he's sleeping. Although God does come to him when he's awake, but his profound visions, like this angels going up and down, uh, is a sleep vision. Another sleep vision he has is right now. As he's in the midst of preparing to meet Esau, what happens? He meets a man. That man, of course, is an angel, whether it's the guardian angel of Esau, whether it's his conscience, whether it's a test by Hashem. He struggles. He has a wrestling match. First incident of mixed martial arts, because as dawn is coming, the man wants to break free of Jacob for whatever reason. That reason isn't really revealed in the portion. And Jacob says, no, I want to know your name. Because remember, in Hebrew, in Judaism, your name is not just who you are, it's your essence, it's what you are. So Jacob wants to know, what is your name? Angel says, I can't tell you that, but you will no longer be known as Jacob, you are now Israel. And with that, the angel takes his hand, mixed martial arts, strikes him in the hip. Jacob lets go. Man, angel, whatever you want to, demon, whatever you want to believe, takes off. Jacob limps away. Later on, God verifies that and reaffirms, yes, you are now Israel. And Israel, the word Israel has different meanings. I believe one word is thera, which is struggles. Another one is the same root as Sarah. Sarah, it means prince. So again, in Judaism, we have a name that has various connotations. They're all typical, all those connotations being related. So interestingly enough, Avram is now Abraham. And it's a positive commandment to refer to Abraham as Abraham. It is a negative commandment not to refer to him as Avram. And yet, here in the text, this is the text that says, no longer will you be known as Jacob, you are now Israel. And yet, we still use the two names interchangeably. This is one of my difficulties in understanding, okay? And there's many of them in the Torah, and this is why I find the Torah so fascinating. It says very clear, you will now be known as Israel, you will no longer be known as Jacob, and yet we use the two names interchangeably. Why is that? Are we looking at his physical self and his spiritual self? Is it the context? Did the sages find some meaning in the Torah, like my big thing about going on about eating matzah for 7 days of Passover, where it's only obligatory or you have to for the first day? But we'll find out. I'll do some checking and we'll go from there. The other thing I want to talk about is the idea that once the family settles in Shechem, Dinah is abducted. And she's abducted by a prince of Shechem. She's lonely. She's in the company of men. They're always working. She's got nobody to talk to. What does she do? She does what any teenage girl does. She wants friends. And the closest friends are in Shechem. Now, was she faulted for doing that? Some people say yes. You knew these people were idolaters. You knew they were pagans. But she was a lonely girl. Didn't anybody attend to her needs, her social needs? So she goes off. And of course, law was based on who was in charge. And the prince of Shechem, his father Hamor, who was they say the Nasi, the chief, not the king, but the chief of a bunch of confederation of city-states, sees her, takes her by force, and all of a sudden he's in love. Is he in love with her? Is he in love with the fact that her family's pretty wealthy, which Jacob had become at this point? So he goes to his father and says, I want this woman to be my wife. And his father Hamor sees an opportunity. And he goes to him and says, hey, let's all become one big happy family. Let's intermarry. Your gifts, your possessions will be our possessions. Our possessions will be yours. And, was there an unscrupulous means to this? Considering what Shechem did to Dinah? Probably. And the sons come in after Jacob is talking to him, worried that he's outnumbered. And the sons come in and they say, well, of course, we can't allow this unless you're circumcised. So Hamor and Shechem agree to this, and they tell their people that, well, we've got an opportunity here, and all it takes is, a slice off of the skin, and 3 days of pain, and we're good to go. And, we can mingle. As they're sleeping, of course, Simeon and Levi sneak into the camp, into their city rather, kill all the males, and then the brothers come and pillage the rest of the city. And that's really all that's done. Jacob barely raises any type of a fuss about that. Does that make it okay that they did this? Because some people say, like my mom, he said they had it coming. Her said it's deplorable, that they would do this. You decide. But looking at the Torah, the fact that there doesn't seem to be any consequences to this, and God appears to Jacob right after this, makes you wonder if in fact it was justified. In fact, it was self-defense, because if the people were able to take their sister, well, where does that leave them? Lots of questions. Something for discussion in our Torah study, maybe in outside circles as well. So, Shabbat Shalom again. Looking forward to seeing you at our earlier time on Friday nights. And we got our Hanukkah celebration coming up December 5th. Looking forward to seeing you there. We've got a congregational meeting coming up. We're going to be visited by the police of Ontario as kind of a community relations. So looking forward to all that.